Welcome to Biztech's Enterprise Technology Show, the show where we feature technology companies operating across Asia, talking about their solutions and how they make a difference to their customers' businesses. Today, we speak to Sheena Chin, Managing Director for ASEAN for Cohesity. Now, Cohesity develops software that allows IT professionals to back up, manage, and gain insights from their data across multiple systems or cloud providers. Now, Sheena, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. Nice to be here.
Now, Sheena, could you start by giving us an overview of Cohesity and its history?
Sure. So Cohesity is a data management company founded by this gentleman by the name of Dr. Mohit Aaron. If you go Google on Mohit, you'll realize that he had two very successful stints in his past. He started in Google as one of their lead developer, which kind of like created the web scale file system, right? And then further to that, he moved on. He was the co-founder of Nutanix, where the new age of hyper-converged primary storage was being put together. So with these two great experiences that he had, he kind of like put both together, the web scaler, where it's really helping a huge audience to access, huge amount of data, as well as the convenience of enabling hyper-converged on primary storage. We put these two great concepts together to try to solve the problem of data management, and in particularly for the space of secondary data. Because if you look at the enterprise world today, there's just so much data to manage. And if you look at the statistics out there, 80% of the data are hardly even being managed. So it is a huge problem to solve, and this is where we put Cohesity together with many talents from multiple organizations that he managed to hire to join him in order to really make this work and help enterprise solve their problems.
Okay, so I think to help our audience get around what Cohesity does, could you give us an example of how a typical customer would use Cohesity? Because the interesting factoid that you shared is 80% of data is really not managed at all. So tell us, perhaps by giving us a scenario or two, how different customers use Cohesity.
Right. Maybe I can just share a bit of my observation of the current state of things. Right. So if you look at what's happening in the enterprise space today, or rather, maybe I should not even restrict to just the enterprises. If you look at the organizations ranging from SMBs to the large enterprises, to even the government agencies, the huge banks out there, they all have one common problem, which is really to manage data effectively and over time. Right. So technologies have been introduced for many years back. Typically, you will see companies who have established their systems, their IT systems, for 10 years, 20 years, or 30 years ago. But the common thing is, most of the time, these systems that have been built 20 years, 30 years ago, they are still in place. Why? Because they have been identified, they have been selected to solve a specific problem then. Right? Today, most of these technologies are still solving those problems. But what happened along the years is business demand increases. There are new dimensions, there are new requests because there are new platforms that enterprises are required to operate. It's no longer just on premise. If you understand how IT data systems are being set up, people go to the cloud, and sometimes not just one cloud. They have to go and adopt multiple clouds.
That's right.
And there are also times for the larger organization, they have to go regionalize or globalize. So therefore, there are also remote offices that are required to be set up. And if you look at what happened over the past 1.5 years or so with the pandemic, with the COVID that has been introduced, most people have been working from home. So remote connections, virtual meetings, all these are really becoming norms. A lot more virtual sharing. So this kind of like add on further strain to how data has to be managed, right? So the adoption of older technologies, the stretching of these technologies to really keep up with all these current demands has been really creating a strain. And you could see IT practitioners trying to really apply security controls, trying to do a lot of things to ensure that their data are properly managed or even secure, but it's always a catch-up. And the other observation is the bad actors in the cyberspace out there have not been very kind, or rather they have been very diligent, right? You have been hearing things or seeing in the news, they are really building great skill set now to perpetrate into the system. And ransomware is just increasing big time, right? Right now, what has been said is every 11 seconds, there will be a ransomware attack. And in some 10 years time, that will increase to some every 2 seconds. So that is really some scary numbers. So with that in place, I think there is a need to simplify things. So back to the question to what Cohesity does and how do we help the enterprises. So firstly, we are about helping these enterprises to simplify how they should be managed, to be managing their data systems. So to start off with is we look at what they have. Most of the time when we talk to enterprises, they have lots of legacy technologies and they are being stretched, they are being customized, most of the times heavily scripted, and they force one system to work with another, through lots of scripting, lots of customization. So that creates a toll in terms of managing it for the IT people. So we help to identify, okay, what are the systems that could be modernized, create a single platform that help them consolidate all the data that they have, and to consistently index them so that we will help to facilitate search. And once things are properly classified, then they can apply their security tools accordingly so that they can get the most effective way of managing their data at the same time keeping their data secure.
Okay, so Sheena, then in that case, so you're a next generation data management solution. So I think back to 20 odd years ago when I was in enterprise technology of how everything in terms of data management was very hardware centric, whereas today it's all software centric.
Correct.
How does a next generation data management solution then help to really address pain points of businesses today better than it did before when it was so hardware centric? And as you pointed out, all these legacy systems, pulling out data, managing the data, difficult. How does this new generation solutions like Cohesity help businesses better?
Sure. So we are clearly a software-defined technology, right? So if you talk about how, what a next-gen technology should be, I think firstly, it has to be something that works very well today, addressing today's problem, today's demand, but it has to also have the ability to address future demands and requirements over time, right? Because as I said earlier, we are going through the problem of trying to force technologies that are belonging to yesteryears to solve current or even future problems. It is really a stretch, and therefore it creates blind spots, it creates the vulnerabilities, and the attack surface is just increasing based on that. So if we want to make a refresh, if we want to change or start investing in next gen, it has to be something that can future-proof. It has to be something that has the ability to scale in a simple way. Right? In terms of when I say scale, it has to be something that is able to keep up with a bigger volume, bigger capacity in terms of data. That's one. Multiple workloads, modern workloads, the ability to support the portability, moving from on-premise to a hybrid to a cloud environment, regardless of how the company is moving. At the same time, the point that you have mentioned, to be agnostic in terms of working on various hardware platforms, because there are just so many hardware brands and hardware technologies out there. Each has its merits and strengths, right? So we help organizations not to get locked in by any hardware brand. Today, you can work with you can use Cohesity technology on a brand A, and tomorrow, if you want to scale, you want to expand, you can pick another brand and help to really scale accordingly. So that's what we really meant by a good approach in terms of next gen.
Okay, Sheena, you brought up a very key point about vulnerability to ransomware in terms of organizations are facing today, in terms of cybersecurity, which is now top of mind for CIOs. Now, what's the role of really next generation data management solutions, really from improving defenses against security threats, which are, as you said, every 11 seconds. So that's a number that people need to have in their heads.
Yeah, that's a scary number. And thanks for asking that. I think that's a good question as well. So I think first of all, if you are able to really simplify and get rid of complexities that are resulted from managing various silos and forcing them to work together, that is really creating a big complexity out there. So if you can get rid of that, simplify things, that will really give one a good view, a good line of sight, good visibility of what data one is managing. Like the good old who, what, where, when, and how. I think this has to be really be at the top of the IT practitioners. That's one. And to be ahead of the cyber threats, I think it's also important to make sure one look at next gen technologies that is built up based on the zero trust principle, so that it can help to really ensure authentication and access are well managed. Because you don't want to have a tool that address a certain data management function, and at the same time, it's also creating a backdoor for the bad actors out there.
Yeah,
that's just two. And then the third point is, do adopt some sort of AI technologies to complement the human part of it, right? I'm quite sure most enterprises hire good talents to really manage their systems, especially the cyber security talents, right? It is always good to also implement some sort of AI so that there's a good complement to help detect, so that we can really stay ahead of the curve, right? And then of course, finally, as I mentioned earlier, in today's world, it is inevitable that the various systems have to work together because of the demands of the business, the needs of certain applications that are coming up because of specific business function. So there are several products out there. We cannot avoid them, but it will be good to make sure we do have a technologies that's running on the open APIs, so that integration is simple. Simple not just in terms of implementing, but simple also in terms of managing over the long time. And then it shouldn't just stop at the point of deployment, because over time, as the business demands grow, there will be more and more applications to be introduced. So how to really make sure all this can be added on neatly and easy to manage, so that when you run your testings and your to apply your security controls, things can be within a good level of manageability.
Okay, Sheena, I want to now tap your experience in helping organizations on their data management journey.
Mm-hmm.
Now, firstly, when should organizations then review their data management procedures that they already have in place? Because after all, some of these, as you said, legacy issues, they have procedures that probably were not changed for many years. So when should someone say, okay, hang on, we need to review our procedures? Tell us more.
Right. So if one has not been reviewing, then yeah, better start now, like right now. Yeah, and especially over the past 1.5 years, I do notice many organizations, the CIOs, the CISOs that I talk to, they started questioning themselves. And we were like, okay, we have invested heavily in the rendering, in implementing security controls. We have a lot of things. We secure our edge, we secure our email system, our network, our storage and whatnot. That should be enough. That was some sort that mindset prior to COVID. But when people started working from home, I realized that has been quite a driver to really push people to start rethinking. And then of course, they started observing the rise of the cyber attacks and all. It really get many people to rethink, okay, is my approach sufficient? Can I stay status quo and just go along and run the test from my security controls? A lot of times, they landed in the answer as in no, they need to really review, and not just conducting one review, but to perform that review regularly, right? So in terms of the overall architecture, I'm actually quite happy to see that most enterprises are very open to reconsider, okay, if today that is my environment, I'm running on a few systems, they've been there for some 20 years, still doing the job, but there's a lot more to do in order to maintain. Is that approach enough? or should I do something more? Because after all, it's still based on people, process, technology, right? You may have the most diligent personnel, but if your technology is just aging out, it's just too much to handle, it may actually in turn create a lot of exhaustion for the people. And that leads to a blind spot, that leads to having vulnerability, and then you get the bad actors taking advantage, using that as a Trojan or using that as a backdoor to try to really attack your systems. And the worst case is if you happen to have a disgruntled employee, guess what will happen? One will really take advantage, and the enterprise is just creating a backdoor for themselves. So most of them are really realizing this, and therefore they started reviewing. And of course, then the next phase is to review and evaluate possibility to either do a massive change to modernize the architecture, or to take the phased approach to modernize, from the more critical data assets, and then slowly work their way to create their environment to be in a better form, in an easier and manageable form, so that they can always stay ahead of the bad actors.
Now, Sheena, I want to now focus in on a little bit about you, because as a leader in technology who has worked for everyone from IBM to Veritas to Symantec, you're a women tech leader in a traditionally very male-dominated space. What advice would you like to share with women who aspire to leadership in technology?
I think to begin with, I really, hope that no one would be looking at gender in terms of who to fit into what kind of position. I mean, I just so happen to be doing what I am doing because I enjoy doing what I'm doing, right? When I was way younger, I aspired to be in IBM, and I kind of like told my family members that will be the place that I retire in. Okay. Because IBM is such a wonderful organization, and they still are, right? The thing is, after I joined IBM, I realized that, hey, there's just so much more, so much more that one could really address or help to convey to the folks out there who are managing their technologies, their IT systems. So that's where the next journey after IBM, which came my way, that there's Symantec, right, to really address security. And that was the time where it just slightly passed, I think 5 years on after the dot-com era. So most companies are actively looking at how to apply layers and layers of security. So at that time, I joined Symantec with a mindset of, okay, I think it's important to invest to secure, but it's also equally important to be very pragmatic. And I'm somebody who really believes in reality. So I joined that way to take the conversation and work with several organizations to really get into a pragmatic approach to secure their organizations. And of course, the brand Veritas was part of Symantec at that time, right? So when the company split, I was assigned to lead the Veritas organization. And Veritas was a good organization with backup technologies and all. But at that time, I had this urge to really give back to the industries, right? So when the opportunity came my way, somebody was sharing with me, hey, what if you are able to help organizations secure their data, to help them better manage it in a more simplified, a more modernized way, such that their technology investment will not only not be wasted or not only be depreciated over time, but on the contrary, that technology could really appreciate and do much more. So in other words, helping enterprises future-proof their IT setup. So I'm like, hey, come on, there's no such technology, right? So, but as I researched further, then I realized that yes, something does exist. And like I introduced Mohit earlier, he really wanted something that is running on the open API concept, address one area in data management, however the organization wanted to get started with, and over time help to mitigate the gaps, help to address other areas in terms of data management. So maybe I can just share an example. How we are solving some of the common problems out there is really helping companies with their backup. So backup technology is nothing new, and most companies have it. But again, if you look at how the bad actors out there in the cyberspace are conducting their attacks these days, they're getting smarter, right? Beyond the social engineering and all, they also planted, to kind of like, create the trap for organizations to even back up the ransomware as part of their process. So, and the moment they have to perform a restore, and that's it, the bomb will just erupt.
Yeah.
So it is really important to ensure that the data management technology that is adopted really helps to address the immutability, such that if everything's failed in terms of your layers and layers of securities that every organizations are implementing, at least you can tell the ransomware attackers to really just go away. You don't even want to pay a single cent, because you are able to still protect and ensure the integrity of the data and bring it back. So I think that's something that kind of like got me thinking. It's so important to really help organizations to have that capability, because I have seen companies where they have been attacked via a ransomware incident. They scramble. They were like, okay, what should I do? If the bot were to be aware of this, there's a lot more they have to do, right? How to recover, how to minimize data loss, how to protect their reputation. And it is actually very sad to say that, I have come across some of them who was really so tempted to just pay the ransom. Actually, some of them actually paid.
Yes,
the cost of paying the ransom
becoming more common, quietly paying.
Yeah, and the cost of paying is lesser than the hassle that they need to take.
Yeah.
But even though in their heart, in their mind, they know that that's not the right thing to do. So therefore, it is really important to help to ensure that they take every steps, right? Have the ability to detect, to protect, and if all else fail, restore confidently, successfully. So I think that's what we really want to do. Yeah, and I'm glad that I found where I am today to be able to work with the other practitioners within Cohesity to bring that value across to the enterprises out there to achieve this.
Now, Sheena, it's been a very informative conversation. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Now, I'm Brian Fernandez, and we've been speaking to Sheena Chin, Managing Director for ASEAN for Cohesity. Now, on Biztech's Enterprise Technology Show, this video and podcast will be on our various platforms, as well as our website, www.biztech.asia. Please like and subscribe to our various platforms. Thank you very much for tuning in.